how many of you launched a startup in the last year? How many of you? Raise your hand. So big applause for you guys, of course. Stop. How many of you did a successful exit in the last year? Only one, you. Let me hug you. What's your name? Ferdinando, okay. How much money? Come on, Joey. No, it was a successful exit. All right, very cool. One. So, only one. Another one. This column. So this is the rich side of the whole, and this is the poor side of the whole. Okay, fine for me, no problem. But the point is this. The person that has got the next slot, he really knows how to make exit. And I just tell you this story before to introduce you. Last time I spoke with him, I was asking for an interview, so I was talking a little bit with Martin Varsavsky. And I saw him very relaxed. And I thought, wow, he's really relaxed. I think he's probably cool like that. But was the day after that Tumblr did an exit. And Martin was one of the investors, you know. So it seems quite good. I don't remember. How much money was Tumblr? It was 1 billion. All right, 1 billion, you know. So I think it was quite good. So please, really huge welcome to one of my best speakers, one of the person that I most admire as an investor in the tech industry, Martin Varsavsky. Hi, Martin. Welcome.
So hello, everyone. I wanted to speak, well, it's interesting, the introduction related to exits. I wanted to speak about cooperation in a way that it may lead to exits. So I've been an active founder, CEO, and I've also been an active angel investor, and it's true that Tumblr was my first exit over $1 billion, but I already had 4 exits at close to $1 billion in my other companies out of Spain and out of US. Companies like Jastel, Ya.com, Eolia, and now I'm the CEO of Fon. And now, what I'm going to talk about today is that the world has changed, and I'm going to talk about 4 companies that I call AGAF. And these AGAF are Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook. And the issue of everyone who's here today, how to deal with AGAF in some way, is something that's going to happen to you. Whatever, if you're doing anything relevant, AGAF will be around you, okay? And the question is, how are you going to navigate dealing with Apple, dealing with Google, dealing with Amazon, dealing with Facebook? Yes, you may run into some other companies in your life, but as a successful technology company, these 4 companies will determine a lot of what's going to happen to you in the next 5 or 10 years building businesses. So what I wanted to do is give you at least my experience of dealing with these 4 companies, maybe giving you tips on how to deal with these 4 companies, and maybe something useful comes out of this conversation, which we're going to engage in a question and answer, in which you yourselves are better prepared as you become more and more successful on how to deal with the 4 more successful companies in the world right now. So at Fon, we have Google as an investor, and we were the first European investment that Google ever made. Google was already a very significant company when I first started dealing with them with Fon in 2006. And Google practically dominates a lot of the technology world right now, except that it's constantly running into other gigantic companies like Apple, Facebook, and so on. And we're going to talk about the interaction of these companies. These companies, so Fon became a new phenomenon in 2006. People started sharing Wi-Fi, and a lot of these companies saw that Wi-Fi was a tremendous opportunity for them, but in different levels. For Apple, it meant to sell more gadgets. For Google, it meant to sell more ads. For Amazon, it meant to sell more things. And for Facebook, it meant to connect more people. All those platforms saw the idea of ubiquitous Wi-Fi as something incredibly interesting for them. And as we grew organically, we called on them, but they called on us. I guess the most special moment of this quest was Steve Jobs, because it's very interesting that Steve Jobs became aware of phone and called me and said, I want to talk about phone. Can you come and see me? Right? And when you get a call from Steve Jobs, at that moment, and even now today as a mythical figure, I think that I was in awe. I said, I can't believe I did something that I got the attention of Steve Jobs, even though by then I had Google as an investor. But Steve Jobs was, to me, sort of in another league. But as easy as it was, or relatively easy it was to deal with Google, it was incredibly difficult to deal with Apple. And it was incredibly difficult to deal with Steve Jobs. When I walked into the meeting at One Infinity Loop, he looked at me and he says, your phone, right? I said, yes. Well, we're going to do phone without you. And that was the beginning of the meeting. So I said, oh yeah, you're going to do phone without us, so why am I here, right? And we basically fought for 90 minutes. 90 minutes of fighting about everything. Steve Jobs was the most difficult person I ever met in business. I never had any dealings in the end with Apple, but Apple was the biggest driver for our success because the iPhone became, Wi-Fi became such an important part of the life of the iPhone, and then of course the iPad, and then of course Android, which started as an imitation of all the Apple products, but now has taken a life of its own. The Wi-Fi world, we exist thanks to Steve Jobs, I would say. And I will always be grateful. But dealing with Apple was an absolute nightmare. And then when I left that meeting, I went to see my partners at Google. I went to see Sergey, the co-founder of Google, and I said, Sergey, I just had the worst meeting of my life. Everyone knows Steve is like that. Like, for him, this was, of course. But he's a genius, and he's the toughest person in the world to deal with. Well, I had no idea. I had never gone to a talk like this where somebody told me how each of these people were. So then when Luca asked me, he said about coming here, and then I said, what are you going to talk about? I thought, well, I'll talk about this. I've never spoken about this before. And I thought, I should help people when they meet these companies, because these companies have the imprint of their founders. When you deal with Amazon, even if you don't deal with Jeff Bezos, you deal with Jeff Bezos. When you deal with Google, if you don't deal with Larry, Sergey, and Eric, you deal with Larry, Sergey, and Eric. There's something, each of these companies have, Zuckerberg and now maybe Sandberg, their personalities define these companies. And it is the surprising element of these companies is that they are so successful, but each one in a very different way, okay? Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos became interested in phone. I go to see him, completely different from Steve Jobs. Jeff Bezos is like the nicest guy in the world. He's all smiles. They're all extremely bright. There's no doubt that each one of these founders are extremely bright, and each one of their companies are extremely well managed. But Jeff Bezos, just like Steve Jobs tried to prove to me, for example, by the way, a lot of things that Steve Jobs tried to prove to me, I look at them now and they are kind of true now, but they certainly were not true when he was saying them, okay? The iPhone, which he thought it was the number Wi-Fi gadget in the world. So at that moment, surprisingly, the Nintendo DS was the number Wi-Fi gadget in the world. The Nintendo DS had sold hundreds of millions. So I was at the meeting, I said, yeah, because we have the number one Wi-Fi gadget in the world. And I said, Steve, you sold as many iPhones in your career as Nokia sells in 1 month. Because at that point, it was true. that he had sold as many iPhones as Nokia sold in 1 month. But it's crazy, and for those of you who read the biography of Steve Jobs, one thing that is true, totally true in that biography, is the guy was talking as if it was 2013, but this was 2007. And everything he would say that I can think of became true. I'll give you another one. Cellular sucks in Europe. I'm like, cellular sucks in Europe. Mobile, cellular, they call it in America. Mobile sucks in Europe. I was like, hurt. My pride. I said, look, America sucks. The connections are terrible. You have to sign up with 3 operators to make a phone call. Well, now go to 2013 and go to New York with LTE and go everywhere in the States with LTE and go everywhere in Europe and see where you find LTE, and you will see that his vision of 2007 is pretty much true in 2013, and that America has leapfrogged us in mobile in a lot of ways, which seem inconceivable in 2007 when this meeting took place. Okay, now I'm going to switch a little to Google. So Google is built upon the personality of the founders of Google, Larry and Sergey. I had many chances, many more chances to interact with them and be with them than to be with Steve Jobs. So these are 2 friends who meet at university and start a company which is basically living on a cash cow, which is ads and everything related to ads, and it spends all the money it makes from AdSense and search into what I would call another university that constantly comes up with amazing experiments, some of them which take off and do very well. But really the most successful other things that Google have done has been some very smart acquisitions like the YouTube acquisition, right? So Larry and Sergey have a tolerance for failure that Apple never had and Steve Jobs never had. Apple and Google are 2 companies that have a completely different approach to business. Let's say, now that we're closer to that part of the world, they are more like the Athenians and the Spartans, okay? It's like, and you can guess which ones is which, right? In Apple, there is, from what I saw, there's very little debate. Apple is about executing orders that come from the top in an extremely well-organized way, and they are amazing at that, the best company in the world. The problem is they lost Steve Jobs, and now we'll see how they manage with Tim Cook, who's amazing at putting together the things that Steve Jobs used to think about, but now he has to come up with those things and put them together. And that's a very difficult thing. I had very minor interaction with Tim Cook. I cannot really say much, but he didn't look to me at all like Steve Jobs. Okay, so this is a company that now has an amazing COO as CEO, but no CEO, right? In a way, the way I see it now. Facebook, it's a very different. So when Facebook got started, they wanted to launch in Spanish. They contacted me, Javier Olivan, that Zuckerberg wanted to come to Spain. This was also around 2007. I loved Facebook, and I said, okay, I'll do the launch in Spanish. So Zuckerberg came to Spain, to a theater I own. We did the launch. We invited a lot of engineers. And I spent a day or 2 with Zuckerberg at that point. Facebook is, again, a totally different company. Just like Google is focused on development and acquisition, creativity, Apple is based on a very clear view of where computing is going, at least to them, and they will be interested in any element of computing, including Wi-Fi or any element. When you deal with Apple, you are almost like a driver in a computer, right? Like you're a driver of a computer. So Facebook, Zuckerberg. So this was like 2 days before the Obama election. After 5 hours of talking about Facebook, I wanted to change the subject and speak about the election, Obama. I said something, and he said, yeah, Obama is on Facebook, or they're doing something on Facebook. Zuckerberg is I mean, if we see this floor, he sees every grain into the wood. He sees his focus on Facebook is something that I'm sure none of us has in this room. His obsession and ability. And Facebook grows by becoming a better and better and better product. And Facebook will collaborate with you. If somehow you make Facebook grow, you bring more people onto Facebook. So we are doing collaborations with Facebook that I can't yet disclose. But these collaborations are all related to growing traffic for Facebook. While you can go to Google and say, hey, I have this idea for this product that is going to transform Wi-Fi into energy and it's going to move, I don't know, my lawnmower, and they will listen to you. Facebook is like, what does that do for Facebook? It's like no matter what you bring to Facebook, the story will be, does this grow Facebook or doesn't grow Facebook? But the share is at 50, right? And the share is at 50. It went out at 38, went for 22. I wrote a nice article and I say, buy Facebook shares, keep the Facebook shares. I believe in Facebook. I believe in his obsessive view of the world. I believe that some founders need to be like Zuckerberg to be successful. But I'm warning you, as tech entrepreneurs who are going to deal with Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, I'm trying to at least share my experiences and tell you, if you go and talk to Facebook, it will be buenos dias, Facebook, buenas tardes, Facebook, buenas noches, Facebook. There's nothing else you're going to speak about than Facebook and what you can do for Facebook, and don't even bring the President of the United States or anything else into the picture, because it will not work. They are an obsessive company based on, for example, Zuckerberg's next obsession is how do I bring the next billion people onto Facebook, right? And so he's interested in Wi-Fi, and this I can say publicly, because Wi-Fi makes more people connect. End of story, okay? That is the interest. Yes, he's beginning to have some political interest, but the political interests of Zuckerberg are like, how can I bring more engineers to Facebook? Immigration law. You know, it's like, in the end, it's such a pragmatic, it's the opposite of Larry and Sergey. Once I had dinner with Larry and Sergey, and there was a candle. And this candle had wax falling, as it happens with most candles, and the wax fell on the tablecloth. But instead of going flat on the tablecloth, like most wax does when it falls on a tablecloth, this one assembled like a drop. So we were talking about something. Larry and Sergey started looking at the drop. So I started looking at the drop. And I also noticed that it's actually unusual that the drop, so we started having this theory. So this material must have something with the wax, that it repels the wax. And we ended up talking about the wax. Like, they are fascinated by the world, by science, by progress. They say, hey, we hit up on something that makes a lot of money in advertising. Let's use this money to change the world. It's just such a different view. Now, Jeff Bezos also shares that intellectual curiosity. Jeff Bezos is an incredibly smart, self-made man, extremely interested in a lot of things without being one of those things, like instead very interested in aerospace without being an aerospace engineer, extremely interested in a lot of different things. And that's why Jeff Bezos could become the biggest storage, and Amazon could become the biggest storage of all your products, and everybody here, or a lot of people here are storing things on Amazon, hosting on Amazon and getting services from Amazon, because he can think beyond his original plan of selling books and so on. I do not see Facebook going through a transformation like that, and I do not see Apple going through a transformation like that. Apple was about computing from the start, and the iPhone was another iteration of the computer, another iteration that Steve Jobs could carry so successfully, and I worry now as to who's going to carry it so successfully. So when you go and deal with Amazon, again, here a piece of advice, you don't go to Amazon or Jeff Bezos and you only talk about exactly what your product can do for Amazon and your product can do, because these are curious people. They want to see that there's something about you that goes beyond whatever is obsessing you at that moment, right? I think Amazon has done an incredible deal with the world, with the investment world, because as you may have heard, and I don't know if everyone is aware of this, Apple had more profits in the last quarter than Amazon ever in all its history. So Amazon has told the world, put up with us because we're not going to give you profits. We're going to give you growth. Okay? And yet Amazon is now worth way over 100 billion. A company that has promised no profits. A company that says, and we're just going to change the world, the way the world retails, the way the world deals with each other, the way a lot of things. But we're not even talking about profits. So the PE of Amazon is insane. By the way, I should say, my savings, a lot of my savings are in these 4 stocks. Okay, so I should also say that I like them and don't like them, but I own the shares of all of them as my savings. And I think if Agaf was a stock, because a lot of the problem of buying these stocks is that they cost $1,000 or $800 a stock. Like, it's very difficult for people to buy into the shares. The prices are so high. I think somebody should create an Agaf unit and trade it at $10 or $5, or everybody who wants to can invest with these companies. But look at what deal Apple has made with the world and what deal Amazon has made with the world. But Apple has been delivering the growth that Amazon had promised the world. But that is a key distinction when you deal with this, that Apple will want to know, what can I do for you now? And Amazon will want to know what they can do with you over the next 5 or 10 years. Okay, with this introduction now, I'll be very happy to take your questions.
Right, fantastic. After I did an interview to you, I tweeted, I learned more in 15 minutes than in the last 10 years, okay? Because every time that I listen at you, I think, wow, also this analysis of the ecosystem, which could also mean that I didn't learn anything in my last 15 years, so this is another option. But really, you're always very inspiring. Thank you so much. Guys, if you want to have your chance to get a question, it's not so common to have Martin Varsavsky here to answer your question, so just raise your hand and...
Thanks, Martin. I'm Andreas Fiedler with Axel Springer. You already gave probably the answer to my question because you invest most of your life savings in these 4 companies. But how long will we have an Agaf world?
Well, I've been saying that this decade was going to be the decade of Agaf. I believe that the decade in which we were in, I find it hard to think of another company. I think all of us who are not Agaf have to learn to live with Agaf, to deal well with Agaf, to get the most out of them. I'm sure there's a lot of companies here whose livelihood depends on Google, a lot of companies here whose livelihood depends on many other of these companies. Why are they so much stronger than other people? You could say, who comes next? Who's after Agaf? What about Microsoft? What about Yahoo? What about the Chinese, who are beginning to have some companies like Tencent that is the market cap maybe rivaling? But I will talk about the Chinese the day I see a non-Chinese using their products. For example, on the internet, I don't mean their product. We all use their products, but we actually thought about them in Europe or USA. We told the Chinese to please make them cheaply, and we bought them back and we used them. But the day the Chinese come up with their own whatever iPhone they make, and I see people in this room using that product, then I'll say this is the decade of the Chinese. And the Chinese may come next, maybe for the next decade. But I see this decade as a decade dominated by these 4 companies. I can't see how Microsoft could make a comeback with Windows Phone, but Windows Phone doesn't have the traction, doesn't have the apps. They bought Nokia for $7 billion, but Google bought Motorola, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to see Samsung going like this and Motorola going like this. I think if you own Android and you buy Motorola, I think Samsung's, they also may, like Samsung's growth and Samsung's incredible success has to do with Android. And the fact that Google doesn't charge for Android. And so take Android away from Samsung and see where Samsung is. You could say, well, take Android away, take Samsung away from Google, but Samsung is a huge company in the ecosystem, 170 billion revenues, very significant company. But Samsung doesn't control. I mean, the other day they say, oh, we also do a gold Android. It's like Samsung has innovation, but it's the four companies that run these are those four companies.
Are different. All right. I think we're running late, so if you have other questions for Martin, he will be available for you all day. And I'm joking. Thank you so much, Martin Varsavsky. Thank you so much. Thanks, Martin.